Hello, and welcome to the Road to Autonomy podcast. I am your host, Grayson Brulte. The Road to Autonomy podcast is brought to you in part by Florida Internet and Television. It's time to cut the tax on tech. We're honored today to have a dear friend, Christopher Emmanuel, Policy Director for the Florida Chamber and Director of Autonomous Florida, here on the Road to Autonomy podcast. How you doing, Chris?
Doing great. Thank you for having me.
Oh, you're welcome, and thank you for coming on. Yesterday, we spent a wonderful day at the Flagler Museum in Palm Beach, and we talked a lot about the history of transportation and the role that brands and mobility have played in that. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. For those that aren't familiar, Florida was in many ways built by Henry Flagler, a titan of industry and a really innovative thinker when it comes to transportation. He set up the Florida East Coast Railway, which it's still in existence today, but it's a railway that hugs the eastern coast of Florida from St. Augustine all the way down to Key West. And along this railway, he built a series of luxury hotels. It's difficult to overstate how important Henry Flagler is to Florida and to the way that our state was shaped. When they were trying to figure out the name for the city of Miami, they actually asked him if they wanted to name it after him, Flagler, but he preferred the term Miami. But we were able to tour the campus, see the museum, and kind of get an insight of the things that he did right and what we can learn from those in the 21st century.
And I think it's really interesting about Henry Morrison Flagler that a lot of individuals do not realize is that he was actually John D. Rockefeller's business partner and co-founder of Standard Oil. And he was the individual responsible for doing all the transportation deals and the distribution deals with Standard Oil. And then with his retirement from Standard Oil, he first came here to Florida in 1878, eventually opening up 13 hotels along the rail lines. And it's really interesting when I love our conversations because you and I are both history geeks and we have these really interesting conversations about history. And one of the things that we've had over the past couple of days we spent together is the classic example of history repeating itself. And I'm a very unbiased fan of Brightline, which is now known as Virgin Trains. I think it's absolutely awesome. And we were having that great conversation over dinner last night where you're saying, wait a second, this is history repeating itself and expanding itself. Could you talk about that a little?
Oh, absolutely. At its very heart, the Florida East Coast Railway was an idea. It was an experience. People would get on these luxury trains and be able to stay at beautiful hotels or to be transported efficiently and carefully and in a pleasurable way all the way from New York City, actually down to Key West. And we'll talk a little bit in a moment, I'm sure, about the boat service that was operated there. But the idea of transportation, of that kind of ease and comfort and being something that people wanted to do, that's coming full circle. The Brightline and Virgin Rail is on the Florida East Coast industry rail lines. They're using the rail lines that Flagler established for that same kind of seamless experience. And transportation has only gotten more important. We've got more people, we've got more goods to move, we've got more things going on. And I think Flagler and the lessons of the Florida East Coast Railway are very acute and clear for the coming decades.
And it's interesting, talking about what Henry Flagler did here in Florida, but it was the thing I didn't know until this weekend, was actually that Flagler operated a train from New York to the docks in Key West that eventually put tourists on boats to Cuba. That journey was revolutionary at the time because it only took 3 days to go from New York City to Cuba. And the interesting thing about that was that Flagler operated the rail lines, operated the boat, and then operated the hotel in Cuba. It's a fascinating model where we're seeing the transportation brands take control of that whole experience. And there's a lot of individuals such as myself that have been pontificating about with the licensing agreement with Brightline, with Virgin opening hotels around the world, Virgin operating Virgin Atlantic, and now Virgin Voyages. It won't be much longer until Virgin adds in a branded autonomous vehicle that will connect that whole experience. And it's Henry Flagler 2.0. That whole travel experience is that Virgin experience. Similar to the way that when Henry Flagler operated the Florida East Coast Rail Company, operated the Florida East Coast Hotel Company, they were known for opulence, luxury, and it was a really consistent experience. Virgin is known for cool, cutting-edge, innovative, hip brand. It's just really interesting that history is repeating itself again. And the fun part about that, with history repeating itself, as Floridians, it's being done in our state. The first version of the innovation happened here in Florida with Henry Flagler. The second version is happening here in Florida with Sir Richard Branson. As a native Floridian yourself, how does that make you feel? Because my wife and I talk all the time that moving from California to Florida, we always felt like innovation really wasn't occurring in California anymore. It was all happening in Florida. We were missing. And now that we're living here in Florida, it feels like we're at the epic center of it. It's always been here. It was just never uncovered. What do you think about that?
Well, I'm certainly proud to be a Floridian and proud to work with so many innovators and innovative companies that are doing really incredible things. And they're the ones that are the customer-facing technologies and innovations and that whole package. And I think that's what makes Florida really unique, is that we're not looking to create something that's only a few people use, or it's not something that's going to be a piece of software that gets downloaded on your computer. It's things that people do and experience and see and take away with them. That's pretty intrinsic in the Florida DNA, from the theme parks to Central Florida, the beaches in North Florida, to the hotels that Flagler established and all of the destinations down here in South Florida. To kind of follow on that, I think one thing that's very obvious for Floridians and may not be for those outside the state is not viewing the experience at the hotel's edge or at the theme park's edge or at the beach's edge. We really see it as kind of a whole package. And when we're talking about transportation companies, specifically autonomous vehicles, if you look at them in a vacuum and just see them as replacing a drivered car, I think you're missing that opportunity. That the value can be added with partnerships, with innovative links between companies and places to stay and things to do. If you just view an autonomous vehicle as a place to get from point A to point B and you want everything else to stay exactly the same, I don't see it working. But if you can see it add to the system, I think that's when you see some really exciting opportunities.
And you've put a giant smile on my face because you've said my favorite word, experiences. And we're seeing the incredible growth of the tourism economy. We're seeing it here in Florida. A good friend of both of ours, Dr. Jerry Parrish, puts out some incredible economic numbers. Can you talk about some of those economic numbers that Dr. Jerry Parrish has put out as it relates to tourism here in the state and the positive economic impact that it has on the state?
Well, absolutely. There's two parts that it's important to think about when you're talking about Florida's economy and the opportunity here. The first is the people visiting. I mean, we have over 127 million tourists annually. And the way that we calculate tourists is a little different than other states, and this is going to nerd out for a second. But those are 127 million people that aren't from Florida, that are visiting Florida. So the fact that I'm down here in South Florida, about 600 miles away from my hometown, also in Florida, I don't count as a tourist. But the people from out of state do. So that's a tremendous opportunity there. And then the second thing is, because we have this welcoming environment, because we have business favorable regulations, low tax structure, and just a really high quality of life and quality of roads, we see about 900 people a day moving to Florida. So we anticipate this being about a 30-minute perhaps conversation. That means about 15 to 20 people have moved to Florida and called it home by the end of this recording. That's a tremendous opportunity for economic growth and for expanding this Florida dream.
No, it's definitely tremendous economic opportunity for the state, but it's tremendous economic opportunity for the individuals that are moving here. Because the future is being built here in Florida. And with tourism playing such a large part of it, and the regulatory environment, especially related to autonomous vehicles and all the new innovations, and having Governor Ron DeSantis, who's extremely pro-innovation, signing the House Bill 311 to allowing fully autonomous vehicles on the road, we're going to see some really interesting trends happen in this state. And one of the interesting trends that you and I talk a lot about is with 127 million tourists coming to the state, flying into Orlando, flying into Miami, flying into Tampa, flying into the Panhandle and having different experiences. The one thing that's missing in all this is the ability to connect all these things. If a tourist can go fly into Orlando, they can go to Miami. That's really interesting where the Brightline connection comes in. And then it'll be very interesting too in the future when we connect an autonomous vehicle to the Brightline or to other forms of transportation, and that those tourists then can have this full Florida experience, because Florida is a really unique state where Orlando is completely different than, say, Palm Beach, and Palm Beach is completely different than, say, Miami. It'll be really interesting to have the economic tourism dollars spread across this state. Mobility is going to enable us as a state to allow that to happen. From a chamber's perspective, what are your thoughts on that economic growth for that?
I think it's incredibly exciting that we're going to have individuals that can be able to move safely, efficiently, and with a high quality experience across the state. And I think Brightline is a tremendous and perhaps the most exciting infrastructure project in the United States. From a chamber perspective, from the business climate that I'm seeing and the partnerships that are forming, I think it's really important to realize that these modes of transportation are supposed to be and will be complements to each other. There's going to be a need to move people efficiently around a Brightline station. So that's partnerships that you see that Brightline has with companies like Lyft. But also, you're now going to see individuals that are able to stay in one town center and move to another town center on a daily commute via private passenger rail. We haven't really touched on this. This is all private capital. It's a very exciting private project that's solving a public need. But we're here in West Palm Beach. If you wanted to work in downtown Miami and never own a car, that's possible. So I think when autonomous vehicle companies in particular are looking to expand, you need to understand the ecosystem that you're getting into, that each community is a little different and the needs are a little different, and the partnerships have to be made in each community at a community level. The business model around a Brightline rail station is going to be different than an international airport. That will be different than a retirement community. That'll be different than a golf resort. That'll be different than a university campus. And a university campus may be different from university to university, probably will be. If you had a big football stadium on campus, there's all sorts of opportunities there. If it's a commuter school that serves a different population, the deployments are going to look very different. So I'm excited to see the partnerships that are going to form. I really hope that autonomous vehicle companies take a hard look at what use cases are possible with their technology and build those partnerships today.
And you're 100% right where with mobility, especially around autonomous mobility, it's not a one-size-fits-all solution. It's a multi-size solution. So if, moving individuals to and from the Super Bowl or to and from a college football game, you're going to most likely use larger vehicles with multi-passenger. If there's a business executive that's taking the Brightline from West Palm to Miami and needs to get to a meeting, it'll be a smaller single occupancy vehicle where that individual can then get to that meeting. And I think the really interesting thing when you look at mobility and you look at Brightline in general is Brightline is a couple things. One, it is an incredible experience, incredible customer service. But the third and most important aspect of Brightline, and the most common thing that if you talk to any individual that rides Brightline is, it's clean. It is clean. And you can't underestimate the importance of being clean. Coming from the Northeast and seeing how trains are operated there, they're not particularly clean. These trains are spotless, and it's something that Brightline and Fortress Capital should be extremely proud of. Taking that cleanliness experience, then moving that into a different form of mobility, where the consumer has the mindset and the expectation that this is going to be a clean, enjoyable experience that will operate on time. That's going to be really interesting as Virgin transitions that brand into mobility. A lot of brands here are transitioning into mobility. We're seeing in this state the growth of Airbnb. And the interesting thing about Airbnb is that at the end of the day, Airbnb is not a hospitality company. Airbnb is an experience company. And if you look at the growth of bookings versus the growth of their experience business is growing almost 5 times faster than their booking business ever grew. Where do you see the experience business going with Airbnb as it directly relates to mobility and autonomous vehicles?
Well, and kind of going back to where we started, I think history can be a pretty incredible guide here. The hotel chains that Flagler put together It was a combination of an experience company and a transportation company. And you had to understand to operate such a complicated business like that, not only transportation logistics, but experience logistics. And that's certainly difficult. But the customer that's going through didn't necessarily see those as two different entities. It was all part of the same package. And we moved away from that model in some ways over the last 100 years. And now I can see us moving right back to it. So there are opportunities abound for these branded experiences that you and I talk about, for these new partnerships and collaborations among entities that have been somewhat siloed because they are dealing with only certain parts of the customer. But anybody who flies on a plane is going to have to use surface transportation to get somewhere else at some point. If you're moving food across the state, you're using a truck at some point. If you're on a Brightline, your destination may be the station, but most likely it's a step outside that station to something else. And understanding that we are passing customers off from company to company, from transportation entity to hotel entity to shopping centers, realizing that that is one individual. I think that's kind of the frame that you have to look at as a business and find those innovative partnerships to make that experience better.
And it's really interesting if you look at the airline industry and you look at, there's debate and controversy around autonomous vehicles are bad for the airline industry. They're going to have a negative impact on the airline industry. I actually take an opposite approach. I think that autonomous vehicles will have a positive impact for the airline industry, where you're a passenger. The branded airline of your choice will send you an autonomous vehicle. Depending on your status with that airline, there'll be different perks available in that vehicle. We'll take you to the airport. You'll go through a dedicated lane, a dedicated door, where you'll avoid all the potential of long TSA line. And the interesting thing about that is where you can get a push notification and said the vehicle will be picking you up 5 minutes earlier than expected time due to traffic. So you eliminate the anxiety of getting to an airport. Will there be a lot of traffic on the way to the airport? Will there be a long security line? These vehicles will be programmed with all that data. Then these vehicles will be able to drop you off curbside at the airport and put you through these dedicated doors. And I think which is really interesting in this is that you cannot do that in every state. Certain states have laws and regulations against autonomous vehicle drop-off and pickup at airports. In California, it is illegal to drop off or pick up a passenger in an autonomous vehicle. Where here in Florida, you have extremely forward-thinking, innovative airport CEOs that are welcoming this and viewing it as, this can enhance my airport experience. When do you see us having the first autonomous vehicle drop off and pickup occur at an airport? And what region in the state would you think that might occur in first?
Oh, I think there's quite a few airports in this state that would fight for the opportunity to be the first one. So I'm not sure if I feel prepared to figure out who's going to win that race, because so many people are running as fast as they can, and it's an exciting competition. One thing I think you touched on there that bears repeating is that there's a political component to this. Policy gets made at the town halls, the state governments, the federal government level. And autonomous vehicle companies are in this interesting regulatory spot where the vehicle itself is regulated by the federal government. Drivers and driver's licenses are regulated by the state government. And local government regulates the curb. And for an autonomous vehicle company to really be successful, you need to have all three be accepting. Florida has taken a leadership role. Governor DeSantis signed, I think, the best piece of autonomous vehicle legislation across the country in House Bill 311. So we've got that middle part down. In that final local government piece, we've got a lot of great local governments that are pushing forward. City of Gainesville, Miami-Dade County, Tampa Bay and Hillsborough. We've got JTA and Jacksonville Transportation Authority that are pushing for some really interesting innovations. All of these folks are forming those partnerships because that's going to be where the rubber hits the road. That's where the passenger is going to be dropped off, and getting that curb ready and prepared and the partnerships ready and primed is exceptionally important. Florida's in the right spot for that, and I think other states have a lot to learn from so far our success in the space.
And you're 100% right about the partnerships and the rubber hitting the road. If you look at it, from the airport perspective, I'll go out on the limb here, and I'll say it's most likely going to be Orlando MCO. And there's a great line that travel agents say, and they said, "Oh, Grayson, do you know what MCO means?" And at first I didn't know. I said, "Oh no, I'm trying to figure out. It's got to be named after an important transportation figure in the area." And this really nice individual said, "No, it's named after everybody's favorite friend." and I said, "Who's that?" She goes, "Mickey Mouse." Oh, I said, "Oh, I love Mickey Mouse." She's like, "Yes, the M is for Mickey, the C is for corporate, and the O is for office. Mickey's corporate office." She said MCO basically is a bank for Walt Disney World, for the amount of individuals that go through that airport to Disney World. And if you look at what everybody's favorite friend Mickey Mouse is doing around innovation, and if you look at the brilliant, absolutely brilliant, innovative leadership of Bob Iger, of what he's done with Disney, where he's going with Disney, is he's setting the wheels in motion to put the rubber on the road from taking all of the IP that with the Fox transaction of getting 20th Century Fox, the brilliant acquisition of Marvel, the brilliant acquisition of Pixar, and the brilliant acquisition of Lucasfilm. They have an incredible amount of IP that is owned. And if you look at Disney from a business perspective, Disney's two things. It's a theme park business and it's a licensing business. And Disney is all about experiences. And when Walt Disney was alive, if you read some of the writings, he was very adamant that everything must be family friendly under all circumstances. It has to be a place where you can let a child be a child and a mother or a father does not have to worry about a hostile, unsafe environment. It has that old school Main Street from Missouri that he grew up. When you take that experience of Disney World and we fast forward in the future and there's a family going to go have a wonderful week in Disney World, one of the 127 million tourists that visit the state. Imagine in the future the family came cross country and it's mom and dad and two children. And the dad or the mom gets a notification on their phone. It says, "Okay, your vehicle, transportation's ready. Go to spot A1. They get in the vehicle. The family's facing one another. And there's screens in the vehicle that pop up in the middle. Let's say little Sally likes Minnie Mouse. They already know that. There's a Minnie Mouse plush doll in the vehicle. Minnie Mouse on the screen. Son Joey likes Goofy. There's a Goofy show and a Goofy doll there. And then mom and dad get a drink. And they can relax and the kids can watch a show after a transcon flight. They're arriving at the hotel, relax. There's no stress of where do I find the transportation? How do I call an Uber? They're arriving there. And from a business aspect of Disney, they're selling you that experience. That Mickey Mouse plush doll's $19.99. That Goofy doll's $19.99. They're extending the reach of their services there. That's special, and that's something due to the regulatory environment and the leadership of Governor DeSantis. That's something that can only be done in this time, in this state. Do you see more of that innovative business practices coming to Florida and expanding in Florida due to the governor's incredible leadership on innovation?
I do think there's a lot of opportunities in the space. And one thing that you've touched on in kind of that thought experiment is that it's going to look very different than the transportation system that we have today. You can have branded opportunities for long distances. You can have shorter vehicles for shorter distances. You can have an autonomous vehicle pull up beside you while you're on the beach and deliver you a beer. There's a lot more opportunity here. If we think about the cars that we have today, they are in many ways over-engineered. The car that's in your driveway can probably go 300 miles at 90 miles per hour, air-conditioned, 5 individuals, and tow maybe 1,000 pounds of luggage in the back. That's a lot for most people most of the time. Autonomous vehicles can really specialize into specific tasks. We can have machinery and experiences that are built around one thing. And the vehicle that you send to soccer practice, if that exists, is going to be very different than the one that may take you to the beach or the shuttle from the airport to the hotel. Whatever that may be, there's a new variety that I think is very, very possible. And with that variety requires a lot of specialization. So coming back to where we started, Flagler and Florida East Coast Rail 100 years ago really understood that each property was different, that each experience was different, that the clientele was a little bit different, that the needs of every community was a little different, and they specialized. Companies, especially autonomous vehicle companies that are looking to move into an existing system, you really need to understand what's happening on the ground. And there's opportunities in that space for that specialization with the right partnerships, perhaps with the right brands, to really make some magic happen here in Florida.
Yeah, the magic is going to happen here in Florida. And with tourism playing such a large role of our economy, it's going to be very interesting when an innovative hotel brand announces that they're going to open a mobility transportation lab in the state. And they start running experiments, or Disney pulls back that curtain. But if you look at this conversation, the one thing, the clear takeaway is that Florida's clearly leading on all things autonomy. Florida has a growing economy and a really robust, solid business environment. And as the director of Autonomous Florida, to an individual that's listening from an autonomous vehicle company that says, my state has deemed this illegal, I can't do this, or I'm worried about making a multi-billion-dollar investment because I'm operating under an executive order signed by a governor, not by an active legislator. What is the message and the clear takeaway from your role as director of Autonomous Florida that you would like an individual as CEO or investor of an autonomous vehicle company to take away as it relates to Florida?
Well, I suppose there's two parts there. The first one is Florida's open for business. And I mean, I think most CEOs in this space understand that rules and laws matter. And we've got the best ones on the books, that transportation authorities from the Secretary of FDOT down to your local government, those individuals being willing to work with companies, those partnerships matter. And I think the second thing that I hope that people take away from this is that partnerships are exceptionally important. Autonomous Florida at its very core is a series of partnerships among companies for a specific goal of making Florida the autonomous capital of the world. And because of the strength of those partnerships, because we've got insurance companies and energy companies and telecommunications companies and experience companies all talking about transportation and what autonomous vehicles are going to do and how we can be helpful to each other and to them, because of those partnerships, Florida is the place to be.
No, and you really tied it together with partnerships. When Flagler began his railroad career down here in Florida, he started in partnerships with Jacksonville, St. Augustine, the Halifax River Railways in 1881 to eventually build and then own. Those started as partnerships, and partnerships are key to this. And as we look at the space, it's going to be really important to understand partnerships and look at where partnerships are going. And as you've heard in this conversation, we've had a wonderful opportunities about the tourism opportunities, the opportunities to deploy branded services in the state of Florida. And I really thank my wonderful friend and guest here on the Road to Autonomy podcast, Christopher Emmanuel, for coming on and sharing the true vision of Florida with us. The future's bright, the future's autonomous, and Florida will become the autonomous vehicle capital of North America. Thank you for listening to the Road to Autonomy podcast. If you've enjoyed listening, please rate, review, and subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. Want to get in touch? Follow us on Twitter at Road to Autonomy or email podcast@brulteco.com. The Road to Autonomy is produced by Brulte and Company. The views and opinions expressed on the Road to Autonomy podcast do not necessarily reflect the views and opinions of Brulte and Company. The content discussed on this podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be taken as legal, tax, investment, or business advice.